This is Dr. Fox. Thank you all for your continued support for CRPN and CRPN Central. For more information about our mission, please contact us today at info@crpainnet.com for details.
Hello, and welcome to the site. I will be here to train you in the art of being a clinical research coordinator. Are you ready to get started?
Thanks. Hi. I'm really nervous. Everyone tells me there's a lot to coordinating clinical trials, but I think I'm up for the challenge.
Listen, I am not going to lie to you. There's so much work to be done, but please do not worry. I will be with you every step of the way. Ask questions so you can learn more about the role.
I really appreciate your patience. Thank you. I'm excited to learn.
6 months later.
So I just finished scheduling next week's patient visits. I finished up the queries from this week's monitoring visit. We had to get signatures for today's SAE, and we just ended patient visits for one of our trials.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Boy, I can really tell you're catching on to this CRC role. Nicely done.
Oh, and tomorrow we have an SIV. I read the protocol and I have some questions for our CRA. I finished the study source and asked for access to the EDC just to make sure we're not missing anything. I also noticed some discrepancies between the protocol and clinical operations. Maybe we could discuss them before we get the green light?
Wow, you are really acclimating into the role and you are growing so well. Well done. And thank you so much for all of your hard work.
Hey, I have to level with you. I've had some calls with recruiters and they really like my experience. They're offering me positions that can pay me more and give me some pretty amazing career moves. I think I'm going to have to seriously look at some of these offers.
Honestly, that is about right. You're such an amazing CRC, and I know you have a bright future ahead of you. Thank you for letting me know. At this time, we will start looking for new employees. But in the meantime, let me know if you need any recommendations. I will be so happy to help you.
Training, the one activity that will never stop at our community research sites. The front lines are the proving grounds for our entire industry, and as a result, they require a continuous cycle of training, professional grooming, and acceptance. Site staff. Clinical research is not easy, and it is not indentured servitude. Nobody expects you to stay in an entry-level job forever, and if you choose the right site, you'll have the professional support you need to take your career to the next level. Be persistent, be patient, and be considerate for the same sites that offer you the opportunity to advance your career. Site owners. Retaining good employees just doesn't work long term. Where would you be right now if the same organizations who helped you start tried to bind you from leaving? Make the same accommodations for your staff and always be prepared to train the next generation of professionals at a moment's notice. You never know. The same people you are training today may be the sponsor, CRO, and even site owners who will advance our industry in the future. Welcome to CRPN Central, the official podcast of the Clinical Research Payment Network. I'm your host, Dr. Daniel Fox. CRPN Central discusses the real issues with our clinical research industry to explore and identify mutually beneficial solutions for all of our stakeholders. Clinical research is complex and demanding for staff and personnel, with steep learning curves and responsibilities that can take any professional to the brink of burnout. We have come a long way to provide our staff with the resources they need to succeed in our industry. However, there is still much that needs to be done to help. In an industry with rapid turnover and the need to develop expected professional successions, how do we create a positive educational environment for our site leadership and front lines? Today, we will discuss personnel training at the clinical research site level, defined as the development of knowledge, skills, and experience required to proficiently operate in controlled environments hosting industry-sponsored clinical research trials, healthcare technology development, and/or diagnostic testing. First, we will speak with an experienced site director who can currently develop staff training programs for her front lines. Then, we will discuss training with an energetic and spirited professional dedicated to delivering powerful educational opportunities to our next generations of clinical research professionals. To maintain valid comparisons, both interviews will use the same questions, and my guests did not know the questions before the interview. We will reconvene after the interviews, compare guest responses, and perhaps identify the beneficial similarities we may need to foster successful personnel training processes for optimal experiences. Our first guest is a site owner and director with extensive staff training experience. Lucia Rodriguez is the research director and founder of Evolve Clinical Research, a Phoenix research group dedicated to bringing diverse clinical trial opportunities to its community patients and investigators. Lucia's extensive clinical trial experience, her instructorship at Clinical Research Fast Track, and her dedication to her community provide a perfect perspective to discuss today's content, and I'm so thankful she is willing to speak with us today. Please welcome with me Miss Lucia Rodriguez. Lucia Rodriguez, thank you so much for coming on to CRPN Central today.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Lucia, would you be willing to introduce yourself to the audience?
Yeah, absolutely. My name is Lucia. I am the founder and director of research for Evolve Clinical Research. We are a multi-site network in Arizona with 8 different sites specializing in neuromuscular disorders, pain management, family medicine, and pediatrics. I have worked in clinical research for the past 13 years, and I founded Evolve Clinical Research in March of 2021.
How did you get into research?
I have a story that is very similar to some other people in the industry that were going a completely different route. I wanted to go into medicine. I wanted to be a pediatrician, decided that when I moved here in high school. And I started doing that and needed a gap year in between graduating with my bachelor's in medical school. And I saw a posting for a clinical research assistant position. And it was at a small private practice. I was interviewed, but was not given the position because the coordinator from a big phase 1 research site had just closed here. So they had multiple applicants with experience. So I didn't get the job, but I really liked the description. I had worked doing lab research in college, and I was just like, oh, this is pretty cool. You know, you get the research part of it, but you still get to work with people. So I looked up the address of the site and just went in person to drop off my resume when another clinical research coordinator position opened. The manager at the site was like, we can't hire you for that because we're still getting applicants with experience. But then she was just like, come on back, I'll interview you for a clinical research assistant position. But she was just like, just to be honest, you're going to be on the phone doing recruitment for the most part. And I was like, I'm not sure what that is, but let's hear about it. So that's how I got into it. I actually was working just doing pre-screenings. I really liked it. So this site gave me the opportunity to transition into the clinical research assistant role and then clinical research coordinator. But to be completely honest, before reading that job description, I did not even know clinical research was an option, or I didn't know what clinical research coordinator was. And then I ended up doing my master's in clinical research management and getting accepted into this program that would allow me to have a spot at the medical school in Tucson. And as I was doing it, I realized I was still working part-time doing clinical research. I just was like, you know what? I fell into this career, but I found what I want to do. And I ended up dropping out of that program and just sticking with clinical research.
Wow. Sometimes it almost feels like there is a path laid ahead of you. You just have to know like what signs to look for and what direction to take. Looking back now, you're there for a reason. You're exactly where you are right now because of all the decisions that were made years ago.
Right. With Evolve Clinical Research, I've gotten to go back to that site where I started and help do some study rescue, train some other coordinators when they're short-staffed. It's been very much of a full circle moment.
Wow.
Which again, I thought I was just going to do this for a year, and I went to school for it, and then I just kept coming back to it. And I was like, this was not the plan for my career. But then I was like, I just cannot see myself doing something else.
Today's topic is that personnel onboarding training experience for our clinical research sites. Specifically, that time at which your personnel comes in, they don't know what they're doing, and then you, as an administrator, take on the lead for training. You go through the experience and get them up and running and functional as clinical research professionals. I'm going to ask you a number of questions, and I've asked these questions to someone else already, and we're going to see how you answer them. We're going to compare your answers. We're going to see if there's any similarities, any good practices that we can look at for personnel training so that we can have an understanding about how to help our community better train our personnel for optimal clinical research performance.
It's the perfect timing for that. We just started week 3 of training for our 2 new coordinators.
It's perfect. So this is fresh. Have you had experience training personnel on the clinical research site?
Yes. As a coordinator, I would help and train other coordinators when they would come on, but other sites that I worked at have hired me as a consultant just to go back and help create training programs or just to actually do the hands-on training with the coordinators. But the most experience that I've gotten is actually with Evolve Clinical Research. All of our coordinators have come in without any clinical research experience. So it's been training every person with zero knowledge, but with certain skills and knowledge that when we're interviewing, especially because I'm going to be the one training them, we know, okay, this is where they're going to start. Not everyone's going to start at the same point based on the background experience that they come in with.
We are all at a different level in our journeys. So you might have some people with certain transferable skills that could be more applicable to what they do in clinical research versus some of the others who might just be developing their transferable skills right now.
Right.
Can you walk me through the process of personnel onboarding from start to finish?
We came up with a very flexible training program where everyone starts at a different point. Before we had more of like an agenda, day 1, day 2, and walk through that. We have more of a checklist system where it's everything that they're going to need to know to do those visits independently. Lab processing, sample collection, AEs, conmeds, every little detail. And it is a pretty long list, but we decided to go that way because again, we realized not everyone is starting at the same point or not everyone's starting where we thought they were going to start after the interview. So rather than giving them something that is so structured where they may start to get frustrated or fall behind, we give them a checklist where they know for you to be signed off at 90 days, you need to have all of this signed off. So sometimes coordinators get really excited because they get to sign off certain things a lot faster than they thought they were gonna. But it also gives us direction of, okay, they're struggling with this specific thing, so we need to focus a little bit more on that on the checklist. We no longer have an agenda. We just let work at the pace of that coordinator. But what we do is we start where we see that they do well. One of the coordinators right now is doing so well with labs and loves doing lab processing. So that gives us time where it's like, okay, we're going to check you off on that early on so that you can free up the coordinator's time and they can help with your training. It's a very flexible program that we've created just to allow people to move at their own pace and still get signed off at those 90 days.
That's so interesting. It makes it so that you're literally customizing the training and onboarding to the experience of your employee.
Right.
How do you identify what an employee has or does not have versus the needs of the job?
Interestingly enough, right now we were hiring for 2 research assistants to be trained as coordinators. Depending on what background experience they come in with, pretty much everyone starts as a research assistant. And then as we started the training, we realized, okay, there's someone who doesn't want to work with patients, doesn't have that patient experience, and realized as soon as they came in, that's not it. But there is so much to what we do outside of the patient visits to make sure those patients are taken care of that I was like, okay, she's great at doing the labs, the data entry, things that are so necessary for what we do. So we just switched that role to it. We've learned that there is so much information that we're going to get from the interview. Whereas someone comes in, there are certain things that we look for specific to the role. If it's the clinical research coordinator role, we definitely give preference to people who have worked with patients before in any capacity, where we know, okay, it's someone who's comfortable working with patients. We just need to teach them the clinical research side of it. That is a big one. Medical knowledge. So there is someone who we hire who's never really worked with patients, direct patient contact, but they spent a lot of time on the phone doing insurance verification, and they have some medical knowledge that is going to give them that advantage when they start out. It varies. The reason why we are successful in getting anyone who comes in who wants to be a coordinator from having zero experience to being able to efficiently function as a coordinator at 90 days is that flexibility. We're surprised where the interview doesn't necessarily match how they're performing once they get started. But like I said, there's so much to what we do that we can always find something where it's like, okay, we're going to give you more of what you're good at and then supplement that with all the other things that we need to do day to day. I'm still working as a coordinator where it's like you're spending 4 hours with the patient and then that's half your day. And then there's all this paperwork, all this little administrative tasks that you have to do. What we do is we kind of pair up someone who's really good with the hands-on, enjoys the patient interaction, with someone who enjoys more of the admin portion. And that just seems to be an amazing combination.
And it's amazing how those combinations can truly help each other. That is such a brilliant idea, to be able to customize not only the training, but also to enhance the strengths of your employees based off of their preferences. Anxiety disorder, autism, a lot of things may come into play when it comes to facing the public. That doesn't necessarily mean that these individuals are not fully capable, if not wonderful, at exceeding at things. I had a regulatory coordinator one time who was scared to death of patients, did not want to see patients at all, didn't want to do it, but was by far the best regulatory coordinator we have ever hired. And they would do the SAEs, they would do the filings, they would make sure all the IRBs, continuing reviews were up to date. And you know what? They thrived in regulatory. And so that's what we let them do. It made it kind of challenging to schedule some visits sometimes because we had someone on board who wasn't necessarily seeing patients, but we had so much of a throughput that it was fine.
We have the benefit that we're small enough where we can have other coordinators help train. But even that, because I do realize that may put a burden on the coordinators who are having to manage overlapping visits sometimes. This person is not going to be seeing patients, but they're going to help do your labs when the visit is over. It frees up so much of their time. So it's also making sure that those who are on the front lines and seeing the patients see the value and having also the admin side covered so that they can focus fully on seeing the patient and knowing when the visit is over, someone else is going to take over the admin portion and they can go on to the next patient without accumulating all these tasks that are not completed.
Onboarding through specialization of strengths. Brilliant. What do you think are some of the challenges that we face while we train our site staff?
There is so much to know. I'm coming from a small company, not that many coordinators. I feel like once coordinators get a year of experience or they put in their resume that they're working in clinical research, we're battling them not being taken by a big company or a hospital or academic center. Sometimes that plays into their training too, because we spend so much time on training just for coordinators to leave sometimes. That is something that we try to prepare for, to have processes in place so that if someone decides to leave, the next person, we can have them reference that process. That's something that we didn't have initially. And a lot of it was hard to recreate certain things. There is so much to know that we try to become automated when it comes to certain things, like how to add someone to the schedule. We don't need someone stopping what they're doing to show someone how to schedule. There are certain things that technology has become so helpful with, where we just recorded a video. We did a screen recording and walking someone through this is how you schedule. So they get to watch that. They have the step-by-steps and then they can do it independently. There is so much to know. There are certain things that don't need to be memorized, that you simply can just follow the step-by-step instructions so that we can focus on teaching someone the clinical research side of it.
Do you ever plan like a planned redundancy as much as you can to make sure you have backups?
Yes, absolutely. So everyone is cross-trained. And that's something that I know when I was a coordinator, I was stressed so much before going on vacation or just taking a day off. You know, if my card isn't working or if I get sick, who's going to cover my patients? Because I had backups sometimes on the delegation log that were not fully backups. They didn't have the accesses that they needed. Because of that, I try to make sure that we have one lead coordinator and the backups actually helping with the visits. The more that you work with the patients, the more that you become attached to the patients and they're your patients. But we try to do as much as possible when someone has been doing all the visits for the study, actually have a backup do a visit just to make sure, like, okay, they are fully trained, they have all the accesses that they need. So while we don't need it right now, in case we do need it, this person can jump in and do the exact same thing that this other coordinator would have done. We also try to do that with communication with the patients. Sometimes if they text or call, having a backup call them back so that the patients know, oh, okay, you may work with another coordinator next time you come in, and they already know them, so that the patients feel like we're communicating and they don't feel like if the other coordinator was here, the visit would have gone different. We tried as much as possible to have one or two backup coordinators, but at least one that's fully a backup.
How long does it take to have a new employee perform independently?
Fully independently, 3 months. Sometimes earlier than that. We're very transparent. This is a training program, and at the end of those 90 days, the change in title from assistant to coordinator comes with a raise. If you get through that training program and get checked off and are able to work independently, do visits independently, and get signed off earlier, that raise comes earlier. We don't have to wait the 90 days. So that's a big incentive for the coordinators. But we don't wait until the 90 days for them to be working independently. Week 3 today, today we have one of the coordinators working from home doing recruitment calls for a study that is not as complex as some of the studies. So an easier study, but she scheduled the screening already and it's just today. So while they're not fully independent, we do try to check them off on tasks that they can do independently. So that way we don't fall behind during training on our own tasks while we're focusing on training. And the other coordinator, she's been doing regulatory today, which she's been doing so much independently. And it comes from utilizing their strength. We have a lot that can fit into their personality and how they work rather than having this strict position that they need to fit into it. We do it the other way around and they're already doing so much independently. And today is the start of week 3.
I know that training is always a challenge. You're always having to do it as a site. The fact that you are customizing it to the strengths of the employees you hire so that you can optimize their productivity faster is brilliant.
It works. Today, I'm like, okay, I can focus on other things. This coordinator who's so good with the admin stuff and is turning out to be so good with regulatory is amazing. She's creating training logs for all the trainings that they're doing. She's gathering all the documents that we need, that it's saving a lot of time on my end for onboarding. It may take 2.5 more months before they're fully independent. They're still doing so much independent, all these small tasks that add up to a lot of time saved at the end of the day.
What are some of the best experiences that you've had while training staff?
I just had the second coordinator that we hire. She just had her 1-year anniversary. And we started this tradition. Let's do a one-on-one dinner and kind of catch up, whether you want to talk about work or personal, whatever. Let's just go to dinner. Something that she said, I was like, okay, maybe I am doing something right. I've never worked anywhere where I've been so comfortable to fail because I know that I'm going to be backed up, but I also have someone training me in a way that if I fail, I know I'm going to fail and I can ask for help. Just seeing the coordinators in the progress. I love the 90 days and then the 1 year or any moment where we can stop and reflect and see how far they've come. This was someone that came without any research experience who is now coordinating complex trials and loving being in clinical research. And I love my career and I love the field that I'm in, but it's nice to be a part of someone else having that type of drive and passion for what they do.
And I could imagine after 13 years, you've probably worked with or trained with someone you don't work with anymore, but you actually see where they go now.
Oh, absolutely. At my very first research job, actually, I got to train someone who was working the front office, who was like, I want to go into nursing school. This would be good experience. When the opportunity came up, I suggested that to my manager. We have someone who already knows how the clinic works and has been here for a while who wants to do this. And she was like, all right, she gets to follow you until she's independent. And I mean, this girl did follow me everywhere for months. Now she's like a senior CRA. She actually did go to nursing school and graduate, and it's another full circle moment because now we're bringing her on as a consultant to help us go through those complex trials to have a second set of eyes on the medical history, the ConMed. So she's actually coming back to help us like that. I stayed in touch with a lot of the coordinators that I worked with early on in my career, and it's so cool to see what they're doing. And most of them have actually stayed in clinical research. Some of them have moved on to medical school. They're doctors now or pharmacists, actually.
We talked about the challenges, and then we've also talked about our best experiences. What do you think is the best kind of experience that we can provide our staff for optimal training experiences?
Having direction, just from when I was started a new site, or just experiences of seeing other coordinators start at the site. What we do is huge. Being in the position that I'm in, I'm like, I would never just throw someone, give them a protocol and be like, all right, here you go. This is your study. But that's not an uncommon practice, unfortunately, for something that is this significant, what we're doing every day. For the coordinators that are coming in knowing it's intimidating to read a protocol and to realize like, wait, I'm going to be doing this, especially if you haven't worked in clinical research. I have all these responsibilities. Just knowing, okay, this is how we're going to get you to the point where you are going to be comfortable.
Direction and taking training for clinical research very seriously. It's not haphazard. It's not sink or swim. It's not figure it out or get out. It's literally providing an environment of transparency and direction that we need to have successful personal personnel.
Mhm.
If I were to hand you the microphone right now and I said, what would you like to tell the entire industry about training personnel at our site levels? What would you tell them?
Any time that is spent training any new staff, whether it's a coordinator, assistant, lab personnel, regulatory, is an investment of your time. Whatever your role is at the site level, you want to be proud of the work that your team is doing. And that includes every person at every level. I stress a lot when we hire new people because I know the amount of time that I'm going to be spending training new coordinators, training new assistants. But I also know the amount of time that is going to be saved once they start performing tasks independently. And I am responsible for the coordinators and the assistants or anyone working at the site level, actually working directly with patients, going to multiple sites and not only doing what's right by the patient, but also the investigators, where I want to make sure that whoever goes out there, I know they're doing a good job. One, because it is tough to make it to that point where you're fully signed off. So whoever makes it to the 90 days is because they want to be here and they've put an immense amount of effort into getting to that point, because we make sure that our coordinators have direction, have guidance, and always know who's there to back them up. Spend the time training people. At the end of the day, they are the ones who are going to be representing not just the company you work for, but representing you and the work that you're doing in any leadership position or any involvement that you have in their training.
And importantly, even though those people may come and learn from you and then move on, what you're investing in isn't just in your site, but it's also in the industry as a whole, because you're developing a generation of professionals who are adequately trained for quality research no matter where they go in this industry.
Absolutely. I take a lot of pride in training and in seeing people grow, whether it's within our own company or a different company, but I also want to be proud of it when they go to somewhere else and people see what they can do.
Lucia, thank you so much for coming on to CRP and Central today. An excellent interview, and I cannot wait to show this to the audience.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
All right, I'll talk to you later.
Bye.
Our next guest is by far one of the most positive, spirited, and energetic professionals that I know. Lauren Stockwell is the Director of Outreach and Engagement at Clinical Research Fast Track, an organization dedicated to providing accelerated and immersive training for aspiring and developing clinical research professionals. Lauren's special education and teaching training and informational delivery and overall positive character make her an excellent subject matter expert for this topic, and I'm so thankful she is willing to take the time to speak with me today. Please welcome with me Miss Lauren Stockwell. Miss Lauren Stockwell, thank you so much for coming on to CRP and Central today.
I am so excited to be here, Daniel. I love hanging out with you at any point in time, but especially today.
Lauren, can you introduce yourself to the audience?
Yes, absolutely. My name is Lauren Stockwell. I am the Director of Outreach and Engagement for Clinical Research Fast Track. We are a bootcamp training organization that works to educate and empower the next generation of clinical research professionals. Everything from those research assistants all the way through the PIs and beyond. That's really our passion, is helping to train and educate that next generation. So when we walk into those rooms and those conference halls in 10, 15 years, there's not so much of the I fell into this industry. The goal is to have people come into this industry and really, really step into it, knowing what they're getting into, so we can move medicine forward faster.
And I could imagine, especially at the site level, literally the proving grounds of the entire industry, the need to onboard staff rapidly, accurately, and for quality so that we do not compromise our trials is significantly unmet right now. Have you seen results?
Yeah, it's been pretty cool to be able to see those results, in all honesty, and talk with people and see the ways that we're able to support them. These sites walk into their training processes and their training plans, if you will, with the best of intentions. They are like, we got this. We have it all laid out perfectly. And this person is going to come on board and they're going to feel so supported and get everything they need within the first 2 weeks, 3 weeks, whatever that looks like for each site. But things happen, things pop up, and things come out of order. And so offering a really robust and comprehensive training right up front is something that we are really passionate about. It's definitely something that we work really intentionally for to help equip that site staff. Maybe they don't know everything. They don't know how to apply every concept immediately, but they at least know what questions to ask.
Today's topic is clinical site staff onboarding and training, specifically defined as that moment at which we have to bring our site staff personnel up to speed very rapidly so that they can perform in research. As a clinical director, you always tell yourself it's going to be at least 6 months until this staff member is going to be productive. And that's 6 months of time that you have to invest into this person. And then after about a year, maybe 2 years, that person's gone. So you literally have to be investing and reinvesting in your staffing and your training half of the time for clinical research sites. I'm going to ask you a number of questions, and I'm going to ask these questions to another individual. We're going to see how you respond. We're going to see if there's any alignments or similarities in what you're doing.
Awesome.
Have you witnessed or experienced the journey of staff personnel as they've been trained into clinical research site activity?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, especially in these last few years with all the staff turnover that's existed, especially at the site level, but really all throughout the industry, it's absolutely been a staff market. It's a very interesting dynamic to sit and think of somebody and say, okay, how much do I want to invest in this person? But I feel as though we are doing a disservice to not only our staff, but also our patients if we don't choose to take that chance and choose to invest in people.
Can you walk me through the process of that staff personnel in onboarding from start to finish?
That's such a great question. And while I can say it and while I can represent it as much as I possibly can, I myself have not done that. I can talk generally to it, but I'm a big fan of know what you know and know what you don't know. I've obviously worked with many, many students to go through that process. So I can talk to that perspective and I can represent it from that perspective, but myself, I have not. From the student's perspective and from my mentee's perspective, walking in, it's like, woohoo, you're hired, celebration. I was just working with a sweet young woman and she got hired at a huge site network and we were so excited. She got a text the day before she started and it was like, what do you want from Starbucks? Just something little to make her first day, make her feel welcome and encouraged and excited. Similarly speaking, I've had situations where my mentees have not gotten much information until the morning of, and that puts a little bit of a sour taste. First impressions matter, and first impressions make a lasting impression. If you can, make sure that person feels communicated to. They're starting something brand new. They're starting something fresh. Maybe this is their first career. Maybe this is their first professional job. Let's support that person as much as we possibly can, even just by saying, do you have any questions? It could be something as simple as, I'm excited to meet you tomorrow. Here's where we'll meet. Let me send you over the details. Just making sure that somebody knows where they need to go, what they need to do, and just feel comfortable walking in on day one. It's already an uncomfortable situation to meet 50 new people, potentially maybe more. So making sure that they feel as confident as possible. We often start our training off in a lot of computer work. It's a lot of trainings and it's a lot of lather, rinse, repeat trainings as well. Sitting in front of a computer for hours and hours and hours, running through the same trainings over and over again can get a little bit exhausting. People naturally want to challenge themselves. And that's really why those trainings can be so boring, because if it is just the same thing over and over and over again, that's not very challenging. And so it's like, is this really what this is going to be like? I always tell my students, I'm like, frankly, week one's going to be a little boring. I'm going to tell you that right now. But try and move past that week one. And that's really where you find that bread and butter.
I remember when I was starting in the industry, I walked in, they said, congratulations, welcome to the team. I didn't get Starbucks, but they said, our SOP requires you to fill out this matrix of all of these different SOPs. You have to do all these trainings, sign all this off. Here's your training matrix. Like you said, the first week is pretty boring. Sit around, read a bunch of SOPs, take some training before you can even touch a record. After that, it's very much trial by bruises in many different ways. It feels kind of like just what you were saying. You walk in, take all these trainings, and then the deep end. What are some of the challenges that we face while we're training our site staff?
Oh my gosh, everything. We're busy. Are you kidding me? There is so much to be done in a day, and you have this beautiful, incredible plan, and you have lined up your day minute by minute by minute, and you are the most organized person ever, and your Outlook calendar looks color-coded by everything, and then an SAE happens, and everything goes to the garbage. I mean, we have the best of intentions to train and really support these people, and things pop up out of order. And we don't often have the wherewithal or understanding how to manage that. And it's really difficult to say, okay, we're going to do this now and switch our mindset. I know you were really locked into that task and really understanding that concept and just on the brink of a breakthrough in that concept, but we got to switch gears. That's really one of the biggest qualities that I say to look for in a clinical research coordinator is the ability to take themselves out of the weeds and exist in the forest and exist and see the bigger picture of it and be able to shift gears quickly. That is like the hugest quality because that's really what happens. A secondary challenge is having this sense of consistency throughout our trainings, having every indication, every protocol, every vendor, every option is so different. To have this sense of we need to train these people on these 5 things, there is no consistency necessarily there. So even when we're hiring somebody with 1 to 2 years of experience, we still need to retrain them on what we're doing. That's a different challenge as well, is getting people outside of their comfort zones and getting people outside of their sense of knowledge and what they know, and also teaching them and showing them what they know a little less. And again, let's just try and figure that out together. That's a huge one. I would say time is also just a huge one. And especially when we're in such a time in our workforce where everybody wants to work 9 to 5 and be remote, all these different beautiful things that pop up is another really difficult thing. How much can you fit into that time?
Sometimes it feels like the things that you have to train on don't happen routinely. An SAE, for example, or heaven forbid, an FDA audit. I'm sure a lot of people have been trained on an FDA audit, but how many people have actually been through it?
Yeah.
The sporacity of the opportunity to experience things as a clinical research employee, it's hit and miss. It all depends on the trial, and you never know.
That's the thing. If you're working in oncology, SAEs happen, unfortunately, on a daily basis. But if you're working in a low-risk trial, you may not see an SAE for God knows. That's really the hardest part. Here's this foreign concept that's really important, and you got 24 hours. There's all this pressure behind it. Let's identify it. What's the causality of it? And all of a sudden, you're like, wait, I have to hit go now? 8 months later?
What are some of the best experiences you've had while training your staff?
Oh my gosh. I guess my favorite thing in the entire world is when a student comes in and they themselves have all these incredible qualities and they maybe come in and they don't know it and they don't see it in themselves. And what we really work to do is add depth to not only their knowledge base and their knowledge of this industry, but also add depth to their knowledge of themselves and what they bring to the table. The intention at the end of the day is to get a job and to get into this industry and to be a part of a growing organization and help move medicine forward and all these fabulous things. But if they can't see themselves and what they have to offer, we've lost half the battle and it's going to be a lot steeper of a hill. I really love to come into the classroom and show them and talk to them. I'm a big believer of if you admire something in somebody, say it. There's no point in sitting there and be like, wow, that guy's so cool and not say it out loud. Let's tell each other what we admire about each other. I love to come in and help empower people. One of my most favorite student stories is somebody who came into our classroom and she was a single mom and trying to make it happen for her kiddos and trying to build out a better future for her kiddos. She was making, at the time it was minimum wage, so it was probably like $15 an hour. And she's sitting there trying to make ends meet at all points in time. And she came into our classroom and she worked so hard. This woman literally killed herself to make sure she showed up early, stayed late, had everything covered at home so she could really be focused on class. And we were just so proud of her for taking the time and energy to be present in that moment and be where her feet were and really ensure that she was as set up for success as possible. She learned not only so much about clinical research in the classroom, but also about how to articulate the skills she learned at being a single mother and how to articulate the skills she learned in her bachelor's degree and all those fabulous things. My favorite non-traditional background, and I will forever share her story. We had this woman come through, the sweetest woman in the entire world, such a young professional. She was about 5 or 6 years into her professional career after college. She got a bachelor's of health sciences and then went to culinary school because that was her passion. And she was so excited to pursue that passion and pursue that flame that was just calling her. And she went to culinary school, became a chef, and was working in this restaurant business and cooking incredible food and learning all about these different ways to cook. She had this family member go through a trial towards the end of their life, and she recognized that she wasn't making the impact she wanted to. And so she sat back and figured out exactly where she saw her life for the next 3 decades. And she found clinical research, fortunately. She went through our program and became a CRC, but the ways she connected her past work history was so cool to see. She was like, I am great at working in a fast-paced environment. I can follow SOPs because they're recipes. I can really make sure that I have ownership over my work, and she doesn't send any food out that doesn't look perfect or smell perfect or is at the right temp, and holding tons of responsibility. She was able to articulate those things.
And perfect service for customers.
Yes, exactly.
It sounds like the number one thing that we're doing is we're opening up the doors for opportunity. Just from what you were saying on both examples, it was an opportunity door that we opened up and guided our personnel through for a very successful career in clinical research.
Yeah. And that's really the goal. I don't know that our entire industry is there quite yet. For being on the cutting edge of medicine and being on the cutting edge of healthcare in general, we oftentimes feel in our own comfort zones. If you hired a nurse 20 years ago and they are the best coordinator you've ever had in your entire life, I get so many people who are like, oh, I love nurses. That's just their thing. Or they love XYZ profile because they hired one time and they stayed with them forever and they love them and they're fabulous. And that's so wonderful. I always say, let's open up our minds to those non-traditional paths. Why can't a chef get into this industry? We had a plumber come through and he was literally hired within like 3 weeks. There are so many different valid backgrounds that come through our program specifically, but try and get into this industry with so much intention and so much purpose and so much passion for it. And let's allow the space for that. It does take opening our minds and getting out of comfort zones and wanting to train people and wanting to help empower people. If you can take somebody who is entry level and very intentional and passionate about getting into this industry and build them up and make sure that they feel as supported as possible, then we've won. You've helped build a better career for them and a more purposeful career for them and a more connected career for them. And that's a really wonderful thing to be able to do, is to see the potential in somebody, not just what they have and what exists on paper.
What is the best environment that we can provide for optimal training experiences at our clinical sites?
Oh, that's a really good question. There is no one size fits all, and there is no one size fits most even. The best thing that we can do for these people as they come on is create a culture of fail forward. People are going to fall short. They're gonna disappoint you. They're gonna mess something up, whether it's as little as like a documentation thing or, as big as, oh my gosh, I issued the wrong IP. Let's figure out how we fail forward and how we give feedback and how we ask questions and ways that we can support these people in a really robust way that makes them feel like they're included in that decision. That's the best thing that we can do for these environments, is to really help support them from that ground up and build out a really wonderful culture of communication, culture of fail forward. Always have that open door policy. We shouldn't be intimidating as leaders. And despite your title or your pay grade or whatever that looks like, you should be somebody who is there on the ground with your buddies, you're hand in hand. The ideal environment is one that offers that support and offers that encouragement as well. This is hard work. And it's really difficult sometimes, and people take it in different ways. I know me personally, I take on emotion really, really swiftly. I don't know that I could do it. In all honesty, it would be really hard for me to walk into an oncology room and talk to a patient who I knew was dying. We need to be able to give that understanding to people and give that grace to people, the grace that we would want to be given. And I think that that's super important to remember.
I always loved as a leader to establish a culture of acceptance.
I love that.
And a lot of the different environments. You have to accept a number of things. Yeah. The acceptance is multi-layered. One is just as you said, you have to accept that people do not have experience and they are likely to fail. Mm-hmm. You also have to accept that you as a leader, just like in karate, when you get punched, it's always 50-50. If someone does create an error, it's also on you to try to prevent that error through better training. Training improvement never ends. It's always a continual quality improvement because your site always changes. Yeah. And so you're always going to have to make it a very fluid training experience with your staff and with your leadership.
We often look at training as this very formal, let's sit down together and have a conversation. I also want us to start looking at training not as that always, and also just as as education, just as experience, just as, hey, I want you to be exposed to this. If you're going into a room and you're about to do an informed consent and you know your friend just started last week, hey, you want to come in and shadow with me? It's just this sense of belonging and sense of inclusion and this sense of, I want you to be better so that way I can be relieved and that way I can work better and I can work more efficiently. It takes a lot of delegation. It takes a lot of release. It takes a lot of things. These concepts, simple, not easy. And I think that is something that I admire in you. It seems like you create this beautiful sense of offering that sort of acceptance and offering that sort of let's move forward together. That's definitely something that I encourage all managers listening to empower.
Absolutely. And an environment of trust. Trust is a big one. Trust on a number of different levels, especially at a site.
Oh my gosh. Have you read 5 Dysfunctions of a Team?
No, I have not.
Daniel, I need to get you this book. We have a book club. And this is another fun thing. I have a book club with my CEO and a few of our other leadership. And we're not reading like Judy Blume or anything. We're reading leadership books. And right now we're on Crucial Conversations, which another one I highly recommend.
Yep.
However, 5 Dysfunctions of a Team has been my favorite thus far. We're all incredibly dysfunctional. Let's be real. And so understanding and analyzing how those dysfunctions manifest within a team and the building block, the foundational first one is lack of trust. Building that culture of trust and saying, listen, I trust you. It starts with vulnerability. It really does. Sharing things about yourself, sharing personal anecdotes, being open, being honest is a huge part of building that team that is functional, ideally.
Lauren, if I were to hand you the microphone right now and I said, what would you like to tell the entire clinical research industry about training our site staff personnel and how we can do it better? What would you tell them?
There's so much I could say in this moment. Just have patience, have kindness, lead with forgiveness and assumption that people are doing their absolute best, and hold your stories light. We can make a lot of assumptions. Oh, this person didn't show up for this, or they didn't document this, or they didn't do these things, and they're lazy and they're not good at their job and they haven't been trained and all these things. You don't know what's going on in that person's world. You don't know what's happening in that moment, what happened in that moment. Hold those assumptions lightly, hold those stories lightly is the concept, and always look for the best in people. You hired this person for a reason. You wanted this person on your team for a reason. Let's figure out why together. What are their strengths? What are their weaknesses? How can we highlight those strengths? How can we work on those weaknesses together? Have that conversation and have that conversation consistently. Continue to have that conversation every 6 months. Set aside 30 minutes to speak with that person. How can I support you to be better in the next 6 months? Every 6 months, twice a year, that's not that huge of a commitment. And making sure that you're taking the time to be really intentional with that. And training is more than just training. It is education. It is empowerment. It is ownership. It is creating this sense of we are all here together to do something bigger. Always connect the why for people. Connect the why of why we're doing this, why we care, why we stay. And that's where you will lead to a ton of retention, a ton of commitment, a ton of fabulous things within a team.
Treat our site staff employees like the respectful and professional human beings that they are, and give them what they need to thrive so that they can better serve you.
I would agree.
Lauren, thanks so much for coming on to CRP Essential today. I absolutely enjoyed this conversation, and I look forward to sharing it with the audience.
Thank you so much, Daniel. Truly always a pleasure to chat with you, and I'm very grateful for the opportunity.
I'll talk to you later.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Lucia has worked in clinical research, from frontline patient screening calls to site leadership, for over 13 years. Now, at Evolve, she has found her passion in clinical research and cannot see herself doing anything else. Lucia often trains employees to be fully independent trial coordinators within 90 days. Her successful employee trainings have everything to do with adopting a flexible onboarding system by specialization, not by structured and scheduled lessons, that customizes educational objectives to each employee's pace, skills, and needs. Often, training needs are not identified in the interview, but rather when you begin. And when you enhance employee strengths and focus on needs, they can begin to perform independent tasks almost immediately, and therefore provide immediate bandwidth relief for the site team. Site frontlines must always be ready to train the next employee because they almost always compete with employers with deeper pockets. and creating cross-trained redundancies can help to prepare for anticipated successions. And, although never-ending, training the next generation of clinical research professionals can provide positive experiences of empowering employee careers and helping them to feel comfortable to fail in a supportive learning environment. Training must be respected and taken very seriously with direction and transparency, and every employee we successfully onboard is an investment not only to our organizations, but for our industry as a whole. Lauren has guided our clinical research professionals through challenging training journeys for years. She and Clinical Research Fast Track are working to move medicine forward faster through rapid, efficient, and empowering professional trainings. Staff turnover happens, and it is a disservice to our industry and our patients if we do not invest in our employees. First impressions matter, and they leave lasting memories, and strong communication and transparency throughout the training process can prevent exhausting and confusing computer work, followed by trials by bruises. We are all busy in this industry, and as a result, we see sporadic and inconsistent teaching opportunities that may pop up out of order, become confusing, and require our trainees to rapidly explore outside of their comfort zones. Training employees in clinical research helps to add depth and confidence in their skills, and we have an opportunity to truly empower our people to understand their strengths, from chefs and plumbers to single mothers. And when we create a fail-forwarding learning culture of communication, feedback, and support, we have an opportunity to witness our employees discover their individual passions. Training is education and experience, not just a conversation. And if we create an environment of trust, we hold our stories lightly, and we successfully connect the why for our employees, everyone wins. Both interviewers agreed that transparent communication and direction are critical to successful staff training. Both interviewers also found substantial satisfaction in providing employees with professional opportunities to discover true potentials. And while Lucia utilizes a flexible milestone-based checklist to empower immediate employee productivity by enhancing pre-established skill sets, and Lauren creates a transparently communicated and supporting learning environment, both interviewers also stressed the importance of fail-forward and accepting professional environments for quality training experiences. So, how do we create a positive educational environment for our site leadership and frontlines? While Lucia takes training seriously with flexible and customized programs, and Lauren creates intentional and understanding programs for her students, both interviewers agreed the key to success and efficient staff training includes communication, flexibility, and compassion. Provide clear direction and the structure needed to learn not just in the beginning, but throughout the learning process. Create an adaptive environment that will adjust to the needs of employees and their strengths. And understand that, while learning can be messy with mistakes and errors, providing an accepting and nurturing environment will foster quality professionals who will help not only your organization, but also the industry as a whole for years to come. Thank you for listening to such an inspiring personnel training podcast. To all of our industry's new professionals, research is complex, it's challenging, and at times it's an insane industry. Hang in there, and please know that you have an entire community of professionals who are willing to help. Don't be afraid to ask for help, and when you are on your feet, always remember to look back and help the next generation behind you. Thank you to Lucia and to Lauren for taking the time to speak with us today. Thank you to Alisha Moore and Addison Gumbert for participating in today's CRP in Short. Finally, thank you to my CRP sponsors for helping to make this podcast possible. Thank you again for listening, and we'll see you next time on CRP Central.